So just wanted to make sure everyone knew that we're recording this meeting. We have a pretty packed agenda today. We're going to get an update on the I-5 Bridge program. Obviously, that's a big project that will be impacting our community. Have a colleague presenting on a recently completed downtown redevelopment study and kind of what did we learn from that process. And then, as we've done fairly regularly over the last couple years, just an update on our parking plan and what's been implemented, what's forthcoming in the next year or so that we're looking into. So we'll get an update there. Maybe to kind of keep this on track is we'll allow the presenters to present, and then we'll kind of reserve some space and time at the end for questions and comments. Does that feel good for everybody? All right.
We have a 3 p.m. meeting.
Oh, yes, sorry. When we conclude at 2, what time is it? 2:30? 2:30, sorry. It's right up there on it's on your computer. We'll actually need to kind of vacate this room pretty quick because a new group's coming in and tables and chairs need to get reorganized. So not that we're trying to kick anybody out, but we do have to transition relatively quickly towards the end of the meeting. So, all right. I think with that, I will turn it over to Megan Hodges to provide an update on IBR.
Okay, turn the microphone on. I'm a loud talker, so tell me if I need to get quieter. Okay, so I am here to provide an update on the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. I'm sure most of you have hardly ever heard of it. It's not like they've been working on it for a while, or we. So I will just try to quickly cover kind of overall status, knowing that I think many of you track what's happening day to day. So we are currently still working through the federal environmental process. We call it a supplemental environmental impact statement that we are working on. We published a draft of it late last year, and we hope to publish the final version of that environmental document early next year. Included in that is the modified locally preferred alternative, which is the environmental document word for what we are building. So over the last many years, at least the last 4 to 5 years, we did a lot of technical analysis, screened various options, got input from the public, from our advisory groups, and from the local partner agencies that are all listed down at the bottom of this screen. And that's how we developed the solution that is moving forward through that environmental document that we are proposing to build. So here it says in 2022, all of these agencies voted in favor of moving that solution forward. So that includes in Oregon, it's Metro, the City of Portland, Port of Portland, and TriMet. And then here in Washington, that included the Regional Transportation Council, the City of Vancouver, CTRAN, and the Port of Vancouver. This is, since the materials will be sent out later, I will let you guys follow the link here to go online and see. In case you missed it late last year, we did publish these videos that kind of fly you through the program area so you can see what it will look like, I guess, if you were in an airplane a few feet above the roadway. So not quite what it would look like when you're driving, but it gives you a sense of what things would look like on the freeway and surrounding it. So what is linked here is that video, so you can watch it when you have time on your own. And then this is just the text version of what we are proposing to build and what is included in that environmental document. So we have to analyze the environmental impacts and benefits of what we are proposing to build. And then based on the outcome of that, we have to mitigate or address those impacts before the federal government will let us move forward into construction. So that includes improvements to biking and walking facilities. It includes the extension of light rail from North Portland into Vancouver at Evergreen. It includes 3 new light rail stations. Of course, the shining piece, which is the replacement of the Columbia River Bridge. The modifications to 7 interchanges in the 5-mile corridor. Maintaining the 3 through lanes and then adding 1 auxiliary lane in each direction, plus safety shoulders, which don't exist today. And then the addition of tolling that varies based on a set schedule, and that will help fund construction alongside the other funding sources, which I'll get to in a minute. In terms of other, I guess, what decisions are ahead of us. So the stuff on the left-hand side that I just listed, or maybe it's not left. Yeah, on that side that I just listed are the kind of big pieces of decisions that have been made in terms of what we will build. The design options on the other side are the decisions that are still ahead of us. So one of those is whether we will be building a movable span, and I will get into that before you guys laugh at the possibility of building a movable span. Building a fixed span that is one level, or a fixed span that is a double deck with transit and bike and pedestrian facilities on one level and cars on the other level. And then the either keeping the C Street ramps that exist today or removing those. A decision between the addition of one auxiliary lane, or we call it an add drop lane, or the addition of two. Decisions about park and rides, and then decisions about the alignment of I-5, whether it's shifted about 30 feet to the west or if it stays where it is in Vancouver. So those are all things that in our environmental document that's published on our website, we looked at the difference in impact between each of those options. And a decision on each of those would be laid out in the final environmental document that would be published next year. So in terms of bridge configuration, that's probably in the top 5 questions we get asked is, will the Coast Guard permit your bridge? And will they let you build a fixed span bridge? Or some people say that they think we should put a movable bridge back on the interstate so that all types of vessels can continue to navigate the river. What is included in this presentation today assumes that we are building a fixed span bridge, one that does not move, because that is what the program is proposing, and that is what we hope we will be able to build. But in order for us to move forward with that, we do have to address impacts to river users, which we have been able to do now over the last few months, which is a new update. So we have reached agreements with those river users, and we have submitted documentation to the Coast Guard. And so now it's been put back to the Coast Guard for them to review what we have submitted to them so that they can permit a bridge at a fixed height instead of having us build a movable bridge. The decision is still theirs, though. They are reviewing those documents, and then they will open it up for a comment period. The goal will be for people to for no impacted users to come forward during that comment period. So it's called a navigation comment period that they will have open for 30 days. And they are looking for businesses to come forward during that time to identify if they would be impacted, or we would hope that anyone that does come forward during that time actually comes forward and says, I would not be impacted, and by either a fixed span or that those river users or those that rely on navigation of the river would not be impacted, and to tell the Coast Guard that in hopes that we could get a permit for a fixed span bridge. So we don't know exactly when that comment period will happen. We assume it's sometime later this fall-winter timeframe. And then once that comment period ends, then the Coast Guard will review any comments received, and we hope to get a decision from them on either fixed or movable span in early 2026. So this is another new thing since I was last here that we have released. These are visualizations of what a new bridge could look like. So these are developed based on what we have put forward in the environmental document. They do assume a fixed span bridge. So like the bottom picture on this side, you can see there's no movable span portion on it. Some of the specific details in it may change, like the railings may not look like that, but that is a possibility for what they could look like. It kind of just helps people. We talk about this bridge a lot, but until it's built, you don't know what it's going to be like to move on the bike and pedestrian path, or what the freeway or light rail will look like. So this is a kind of a sample of the images. You can go on our website and see the whole list. So schedule, I've already talked about this a little bit. We are here, as you can see from the bubble. We're still in the environmental process. We hope to publish our environmental document early next year. And then we would get into construction in late 2026. So construction would probably be relatively low key to start. That's not major construction of you see people everywhere all the time down by the bridge, but it would start slow and then move into those bigger pieces. So we would get a contractor on board in 2026 after we complete our environmental document. We can't move forward into the construction phase until we have federal approval to move into that phase. And there's a few steps we need to go through before we get there. And then you can see there's no end date listed on this timeline. It just says 2028 plus because construction will last 10 to 15 years in the 5-mile corridor. That's not 10 to 15 years on the bridge itself, but that is for 5 miles of investments, it would last 10 to 15 years. The bridge itself, it depends at what time we end up publishing our environmental document and getting that federal approval. But a new bridge, you could expect to drive across it or cheer across it with a ribbon cutting in about the 2032 timeframe. But we'll obviously know more about that as we actually get into construction and get a contractor hired. That's the current estimate, though. So funding, this is, I'm sure that I covered this last time, but it's always a good reminder. I think people have lots of opinions about how we should pay for this. And hopefully almost any opinion you have is true because we will fund it, or we already have both state and federal funding, and then we would plan to toll the facility also. So right now we have $2.1 billion in federal grants. We're seeking another $1 billion in federal grant funding. That's the last piece of our little pie here is the additional, oh, there we go. Oh, now I just clicked it back. Okay, so the piece of the pie on the left-hand side, right now we have 2.1 billion in federal funding. We're seeking another 1 billion, and that is the last piece of funding that we don't have yet committed to the program. Then both Oregon and Washington have each put forward funding for us to get to construction, which is something that did not occur during previous efforts to replace the bridge. So whenever when I'm down at the farmer's market or at whatever festival in Esther Shore Park, the number one comment is it actually going to happen this time? And I always say we're closer than we've ever been because we have more funding commitments than any previous efforts have. Both states have put funding forward. We have the approvals that we need in order to toll. Whether that excites people or not, that is something that we need to be able to fund the bridge. And then we do have 2 major federal grants that were not options to fund the bridge during previous efforts. In terms of cost estimate, so I'm sure that you've seen it in the Columbian or on KGW. Both newspapers like to cover us a lot. We are in the middle of going through a cost estimate update, and we anticipate releasing that later this year. Just like groceries, the costs of construction projects have also increased. So we don't know how much yet, and we're still going through many series of meetings to get there. But we will share that later this year once we've gone through that process. Tolling. So as I mentioned, tolling is one fairly small piece of the puzzle or of the pie that was on the previous slide. I did update. So the program, the states of Oregon and Washington, the Oregon Department of Transportation and Washington Department of Transportation, we are the ones that collect the tolls, but we don't actually set the toll rates. So we develop a financial plan and we say that we can fund this much from other sources, and this other piece is how much toll funding we need. And then the transportation commissions, which are a separate body in Oregon and Washington, they are the ones that set the toll rates. So they have set up a bi-state tolling subcommittee where two commissioners from each commission meet on a cadence that is necessary to set the toll rates. Right now, they're in a little bit of a lull because they moved forward the last piece that was needed that's detailed here. So there's a tolling analysis occurring right now that looks at a range of toll rates and a range of toll rates for trucks. And then it looks at a low income toll program and a potential tribal discount or exemption for tribal members. So that analysis is happening now. I think there'll be more information on it early next year that will inform the next step of those transportation commissions. The reason there's such a big range on the toll rates is, like I said in one of the earlier slides, the toll rates will be set based on the time of day. So during peak travel periods, the toll rate would be higher versus in off-peak time periods like overnight or in the middle of the day, it would be a lower toll rate. So that's why there's a big range. And then the other reason why there's a big range is they're still looking at a number of different, I guess, pricing options for what the low toll rate and high toll rate would look like. So, and each of those will fund a different amount of funding depending on what the program needs. So there's a number of steps still ahead of us before toll rates are set. Currently, the plan is to toll in 2027. So toll rates would be set in about the summer of 2026. So if that's something you feel strongly about, you can make sure that you are signed up with that tolling subcommittee so that you get their email updates and can provide comment during their meetings or ask questions or send comments in. So this is a construction map that we recently shared publicly. This kind of lays out what it will, the reason, or I guess one reason why it will take 10 to 15 years to construct the program is because we have to do more than 24 separate construction contracts. So each of the colors there and then the list in the little box off to the side, each of those is a separate construction contract that will have a separate contractor hired, and they will go out there and do that construction in coordination with the whole corridor. I guess if you think of any paving project you've driven by or any interchange project that you've seen in the metro area, like the St. John's interchange or SR 500 St. John's interchange or Salmon Creek, that is, imagine 24 of those in this 5-mile corridor. So it is a large set of construction projects that will take a lot of time to do. So what's up next? I think I have pretty much covered most of it in the previous slides. So we're updating the cost estimate, as I mentioned. We are hoping to publish that federal environmental document, and we continue to coordinate with the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration, who are the ones that own, or I guess are signatories on that document. And then that tolling subcommittee work will continue to happen. And then in terms of design and like more detailed design, I guess I didn't cover that on the last slide. Each of these projects won't happen as soon as we get to 2026. It's not like we'll go out there and there will be, a construction worker with a shovel through the entire 5-mile corridor. We will start with the bridge over the river, and then the projects will essentially go out from there. So the roadways leading up to the bridge and the bridge itself will be some of the first construction projects. And then we'll move out to Mill Plain and Washington North and to Hayden Island and those other locations so that they can all be tied into each other at strategic timeframes instead of just shutting down I-5, which is not what we will do. We can't send all those cars over to 205. We will keep 3 lanes in each direction during construction. And the new bridge will be built to the west of the existing bridge, and then will be tied in overnight. Like the roadways will be connected overnight so that drivers and people on the roadway continue to have access. So that's what I've got, if there are questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions.
So if the federal government doesn't come up with an extra $1 billion that you mentioned, what's the consequence to the funding package or the scope of the project, or I don't know?
So we have the core pieces of funding, or I guess we have enough funding to get started. But so we cannot start a construction project. We can't let a contractor hire on a contractor unless unless we have adequate funding for that entire contract. So given the 10 to 15-year time frame, we would start by constructing what we have funding for. And then we would continue to seek funding for the remainder of those contracts until we've built all 5 miles that will be approved in our environmental document.
How much liability will C-Tran have for the financial portion in Clark County?
Can you be more specific on what you mean of the financial portion?
Well, you're showing a light rail system coming across and terminating in Clark County, which is the service area of C-Tran.
Mhm.
Now, I take it that part of it is also obviously TriMet's system as well.
Mhm.
Has TriMet and C-Tran come to agreement on how they're going to arrange for the fares and also for services as well?
So I'll pick apart your question a little bit. So for the capital funding, or what is needed to construct what we are proposing, the states are seeking that funding. So the Oregon Department of Transportation and Washington Department of Transportation, in coordination with TriMet and C-Tran, in order to build it, we are seeking funding for the whole 5 mile corridor. You're asking though about continued operation and collecting fares and using that to pay for the system in the future. So we actually, thankfully, probably there's enough in order to get to a point where we are constructing something or starting to construct it and starting to spend what the federal government has been provided. We have to demonstrate that we have come to agreement on those things. So we can't start building it or can't start spending the money that the federal government will provide unless we can show that we have come to agreement on the items that you mentioned in terms of fare collection and who will operate and maintain it. So yes, TriMet and C-Tran and the DOTs continue to work together. Have all the details been figured out? No, but we have time to keep figuring them out. And I'm sure you've seen lots of things about it in the Columbian articles. So we have C-Tran staff assigned to the program, TriMet staff assigned to the program, working alongside the consultants and the DOTs while we continue to figure it out. And then there will be an agreement where we basically agree to how transit will be maintained and operated in the future. And we have to have that signed and agreed to before we can start spending money to construct it.
Megan, can you move forward one slide while you're.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great.
Any other questions? Comments? All right. Julie was putting links in for those online with resources that were referenced. We obviously share these presentations as well. So if you're interested in digging into some of those details and clicking on some of those links, check back at our downtown stakeholders page for that. Does that happen today or sometime relatively tomorrow? It'll happen by tomorrow. So additional kind of resources if you want to do the deeper dive. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We will transition over to an update on downtown redevelopment study. And so I'll introduce Chim Choon Ko, a real estate project manager with the City of Vancouver. All right. Oh, we need to, we'll bear with us. There we
go. All right. Thank you, everybody. So yeah, this study was completed as a coordination effort between the City of Vancouver and the City Center Redevelopment Authority, which is a board of real estate professionals in the city who help oversee and facilitate downtown redevelopment activities, particularly looking to boost economic activity and ensure that there's job growth and housing for people downtown. So we will kind of brief overview, look at the project scope, findings, some of the recommendations from the consultant, and then recommended implementation steps, and then kind of what we're doing with it moving forward. So this study was done as a in conjunction with several other studies and ongoing work with the city, looking at downtown, including the parking plan, which was completed earlier this year, and the ongoing comprehensive plan updates, and really is acting as one of the data sources that we're using to inform many of the other city priorities and how we're approaching addressing those and making progress on those. So for this study in particular, Vancouver remains a fairly high demand market relative to the region. So we see a lot of people on the Portland side looking at Vancouver and seeing a lot of opportunity from a real estate perspective. And we know that private development really is a pretty powerful force and does drive a lot of the almost all of the redevelopment activity in our area. So knowing this, that it will likely happen with or without the city's involvement, this study allows us to be more informed on what is likely to happen or possible to happen, kind of what properties are more strongly influenced by private market factors, so that really we can step in and be more involved, so to help improve outcomes for the city and make sure that there's public amenities that come with those projects and street improvements and other things. So we also wanted to ensure or get a better understanding of how much growth is likely or possible to happen downtown, to better understand the how much of the city's housing and job growth could potentially be absorbed. So we hired economics consultants called BAE, and they did a lot of the research and data crunching for this report. They reviewed downtown redevelopment trends, property values, and used that information to really identify and analyze strategic and impactful parcels that they think are likely to redevelop or have an economic incentive to redevelop, and would have kind of ripple effects in downtown. They also outlined some potential capacity for what those the amount of housing or job growth that those could provide, and recommended actions for the city to be more involved in those and have more influence in the outcomes there. So what they found is that a good portion of downtown is currently undervalued from a market perspective. So essentially what that means is that the value of the improvements on the land are a lot lower than what the market would support. So indicating that there's a very high economic push for those parcels to redevelop. So that's either vacant land or older buildings that may be near the end of their natural life. So that can be seen here on the graphic. Red is vacant properties, and kind of the darker orange are properties that have low value based off of that analysis. So, and then like yellow and so on and so forth. So I think this really shows that I think a good portion of the city has a lot of pressure to redevelop, but that really is in the private property owners' hands on whether they do or not. So I think it's our role to kind of have those discussions with those property owners, and if they want to move forward, figure out how to engage them and look for community benefits and opportunities for that. So as from that list of properties that were
Did you
identified.
switch slides? There we go.
Okay, thank you.
Seems to be a lag, so we'll.
Yeah. So of those properties that were identified as kind of lower value, lower existing values, we identified a number of properties that we thought would have or potentially have larger impacts if they were to be redeveloped, and kind of did capacity analysis as well as a look at kind of what impact those would have on the surrounding areas, in addition to infrastructure and other impacts. So we looked at 20 total sites, about 32 acres throughout the area. And for this analysis, we did focus on larger properties just because they are more impactful. So from that, the consultants recommended that, so once again, any redevelopment activity would happen based off of the property owner's choice. And it's all initiated by the private sector, but we would want to get involved if we see some of these larger properties or the property owners start showing interest in redeveloping, so that we can kind of ensure that it's aligned with the city's priorities and outcomes, and look for opportunities for infrastructure improvements or other public amenities. So the consultant identified several ways that we could get involved, whether it's through partnerships with the property owners to get to align for certain outcomes, different policies that I think are getting developed as part of the comprehensive plan update, as well as investments in critical infrastructure, and then kind of strategic redevelopment activity on city-owned property if there are those opportunities.
And apologies for the little bit blurry text there. That's obviously not what the normal slide looks like. I think we're having some Wi-Fi connectivity issues. So again, we'll send this out so you can see those in detail. It's just coming up blurry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also not. Okay. Okay, that one's not blurry. There we go. Let's see. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
I'll leave that there for a little bit. Sorry, I didn't realize that was blurry. All right, I'm gonna switch now. Okay. So in terms of what the city's looking to do now, it's really leverage the publicly owned sites. So as with the Waterfront Gateway, and to advance kind of housing, particularly affordable housing and job opportunities. So commercial, retail, other jobland uses. If funding is available, acquire sites for community and public-private partnerships. That is subject to funding, which is not very available right now, so probably unlikely to occur. And then utilize existing funding sources like our Affordable Housing Fund. Sorry, I should have written that out. That is what AHF stands for. Parking fund or other infrastructure funds to advance infrastructure projects that they can fund. Or development like housing for the Affordable Housing Fund. So next steps.
It hasn't switched yet. Try go back.
It always switches when I switch back. So.
Yeah.
So next steps is we will be starting conversations with property owners who have either recently historically expressed interest in redeveloping, or their sites are showing a lot of economic benefit to redeveloping, just to ensure that we're talking to them first before they're approached by private developers. and we can be involved in those conversations early. So we are starting off a work to study active ground floor uses downtown. How can we further improve that or make those more viable and more energetic? And that work is just getting kicked off right now and should be going for the next 5-6 months. We're exploring the feasibility of establishing a tax increment area to help fund some of these infrastructure improvements that may be necessary. And then integrating priority infrastructure projects into the existing capital plans, ensuring that the order of projects makes sense with the new information that we identified, and then again, investigate potential acquisitions if funding becomes available at some point. So with that, that's the end of the presentation. I have a few discussion questions, but also can just open it up to, sorry, it's not switching. But can also just open it up to general questions if people have them.
Let those questions maybe inspire you to ask questions or make comments, or if you have anything not unrelated to those, you feel free. Yes, go ahead.
I'll go with one question. Have you considered pedestrian malls downtown and where they might be?
Yeah, I think if you have, our transportation department is working on those. I don't have a good sense of where those are, but we are working with them for ones that I think they're looking at that, and I think we would look to find funding sources for them eventually.
It's a longer term consideration of Main Street. So as Main Street's being reconstructed, one of the elements there are bollards that are going in to you can block off streets and have events and festivals. But there is one of the things we'll be studying, trying to assess the impacts of would it make sense, does it make sense, positive or negative, to have a more permanent pedestrian path towards Main Street. That comes with a lot of analysis and conversations with businesses and all of that. That type of analysis will probably be done several years after Main Street is done to kind of set a baseline and then engage with that. But that's the one I know we've kind of flagged for future conversation, probably about 5 years out from that for now.
You could walk along Main Street right now and you could see in the street where they're starting to already install the places for the bollards for block parties as soon as Main Street's over. So we'll have weekend pedestrian malls, I guess, for parties and celebrations.
When we go, Marcus, and then we'll go
So I
next. If that works.
I got 2 questions from the Neighborhood Association for Downtown, and they're somewhat related. First is what can be done to preserve historic buildings and existing green spaces? And the second one that ties in the green spaces is what can be done to have a designated off-leash dog park for downtown, given that we're seeing an increasing number of dog owners downtown.
So I'll regarding historic buildings, I know there is a historic building database that several buildings downtown are on, and those buildings are protected through that program. I'm not an expert on that program, so I unfortunately can't speak to it, but there are existing protections in place for buildings that are listed on that list. Regarding green space, we do know that there are some gaps in park service downtown. And I think one of the recommendations in the redevelopment study is for more green space. At this time, we don't have any specific plans for future parks or other green space downtown, but I think it is something that we're aware of and looking at for opportunities to improve.
And the last part was dog parks.
Yeah, dog parks, I can't speak to directly.
We'll have to share that with our parks department. Yeah, go ahead.
What is?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Individual behind you, and then we'll go to you next.
On one of the slides, it said tax increment areas.
Mhm.
Can you explain? what
Yeah,
where
so
those areas are?
so a tax increment area is essentially an area where sorry, it's kind of tough. So what it does is it takes the once the area is established, any increases in tax revenue go to the city or the jurisdiction that formed that instead of to the normal parties. So it doesn't increase taxes. It takes existing, like as buildings increase in value. So let's say you have a $100,000 building. If it goes up in value or it gets redeveloped into something higher value, the delta between that previous tax and the new tax, all of that would go to the city in this example, instead of being broken up into the county and some other jurisdictions. Schools and fire are exempt from that, so they still get their taxes as normal. It just is certain, like the county is the primary one, and there's a few others that I'm blanking on at this point. But
Basically baselines it, freezes it, and then that increment is used to help fund those infrastructure projects. So as Marcus mentioned, that could be a revenue source for a park, or let's say you need to make road improvements or sidewalk improvements or utilities to facilitate a development, you can use that increment. But it's not a increase in tax, it's just freezes for a special purpose, if that makes any sense. It's a little bit more complicated than that, so that's a high level version, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your guys' answer to how can we ensure that local small businesses are supported in new developments?
I mean, I think that's an ongoing area of work that we're trying to better understand, and that's part of why we're doing the downtown active storefront study next. So I think if you have ideas or recommendations, we'd be open to hearing.
and plug to a future meeting, we will be bringing our partners back in December, who are doing that active ground floor study to present. Here's kind of where we are in that process, maybe what we've learned to date, and use the downtown stakeholders forum as an opportunity to gather input, comments, questions, those types of things. What we're looking at there is trying to get a better sense of what does our kind of commercial retail environment look like downtown? Are we undersaturated, oversaturated? How are costs factoring into those things? And are there other perhaps non-retail uses we should also be looking at to activate our ground floor? So some communities are going back to things that we used to do in the past, like small batch manufacturing. Obviously, they won't be big industrial, but more kind of production, entrepreneurial type activities that could also be ground floor in addition to food and beverage or retail. So we're just trying to get a better sense of what's happening downtown, where's that headed, and how does that inform other things we may do. But December we have slotted on the agenda to discuss that in more detail and use it as an opportunity to gather input.
Will the people who are doing this research talk personally to the business owners?
I think we're still
Yeah.
figuring out our engagement plan, but that is one of the activities we plan on doing.
Yeah. So
How do we make sure we're getting contacted if that's the direction it goes?
And
we'll probably work through Julie and Michael Walker at VDA, who hold a lot of relationships with downtown businesses and stakeholders. Obviously, a forum like this, if you're on the mailing list, is one way to stay informed. But I think we haven't fully designed what that looks like yet. We literally just signed the contract for this, so we'll have to kind of map what that looks like out. But we'll use our kind of traditional channels of VDA, Julie. We have different ways to kind of communicate there. So definitely look out for that. But it's on us to make sure that information is in front of you as well. I see. Why don't we go here real quick and then back to you, sir?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, either way, whatever.
Well, I think that we have an opportunity right now with what's going on Main Street to see how the businesses are doing. And they're struggling. This is not easy for them right now. And they should be being interviewed now because there's two things. There's your end dream for what you want downtown to look like. And there's who's going to survive. Who's going to survive the transformation? And right now is the time that you should be talking to those small businesses. And it would be really interesting to learn how many small businesses in downtown, in affordable downtown Vancouver, have springboarded into very, very large, some of them publicly held businesses. So they start in our downtown Vancouver. But right now, they're struggling. And I think this needs to be addressed. And I think it needs to be documented. The end.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything in the redevelopment plan about doing something with Washington Street? Washington Street is, living downtown, Washington Street is kind of one of my least favorite streets. It's wide and it's rough. And the sidewalks up and down both sides of it, in many cases are rough and humped up. And so I try to avoid Washington Street. And I always find myself wishing that something could be done different with it. So I just wondered if you looked at it as part of this effort.
Yeah, as part of this effort, not specifically, this was more focused on the property in the private property, not the public right of way. So I think I would defer to the transportation plan, which I can't remember specifically what that they do or they reference in terms of Washington Street. But yeah,
I'll take a look.
sorry.
Any other? We're tracking ahead, so yeah, go ahead.
To comment on what this lovely woman was talking about with the small businesses. I am a small business owner in downtown Vancouver. We're on Broadway, so just off of Main Street, but the construction for the Main Street project is still impacting us.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted the city to keep the current small businesses in mind when we're talking about infrastructure improvements and improving the city as a whole, because my fear is that as Vancouver improves, the place for small businesses might get smaller and smaller.
Mhm.
And I don't want Vancouver to turn into kind of what the waterfront is, where it's way too expensive for a regular small business to participate in that.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think I don't think anyone's, well, from the city's perspective, our goal is not to turn downtown into what the waterfront is. Those are different kind of uses and markets and what like that, but definitely understand the challenges small businesses are going through an historically large infrastructure project in the city. So we're aware of that. And Julie is our kind of point person on Main Street Promise. The VDA is playing obviously a really kind of important role in that. And I don't know, the number of kind of conversations you have directly with businesses is probably many a day, plus things like coffee corners, constantly trying to assess. Do appreciate what was raised about some more quantitative analysis of what the health is, and that may be portions of things that we can pull into the ground floor analysis as well. So little different approaches, anecdotal versus data, but I appreciate both of those comments for sure. Marcus?
Yeah, passing on a question from one of our business owners, and it might segue into our next portion. If the city's expecting up to 6,500 residents downtown, is the city planning on raising the parking minimums to ensure there's 6,500 parking spots to accommodate them?
No. The answer to that is we're likely through the comp plan process to waive parking minimums. And there are different reasons for that. One of the biggest is the cost that has on housing development. And obviously we're in a housing crisis and need to build significantly more housing than we have. We need more in the pipeline right now to accommodate all that growth. One of the challenges there is if you have parking minimums, that adds a pretty significant cost to housing development. So council has gone through a process to look at that. We also think there are other ways that we can accommodate parking downtown. So we do have a lot of underutilized areas of downtown that could be better utilized for different types of parking, shared parking arrangements than those necessarily in the development itself. So bigger conversation that I think is ongoing though about how we manage that long term in a district like downtown. Yeah. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
We will move on. I'm going to invite Gabe and Anna to give an update on the parking plan. Perhaps what's coming next and any questions, comments?
Hello, everybody. My name is Gabriel Montes. I am the Parking District Manager. I am joined by Ann Stedler, my colleague, the Parking Demand Manager. Today, we're going to go over a couple topics. First is we're going to talk a little bit about what was done already in terms of some of our policy implementation, in addition to some of our parking plan implementation. And so we'll talk a little bit about our occupancy as well as our transaction data. The other thing we'll touch on briefly is some of the planning for phase 2, which is the second phase of 7-day enforcement north of Evergreen. Right now, we are tentatively planning to start the planning process in early 26. So a lot of the data and information that you'll see here will be used to inform our phase 2 process, in addition to an extensive community outreach and stakeholder engagement that we plan on engaging in. Again, the planning process will start in early 26, so I just wanted to tee that up for folks. But today we'll focus mainly on what has already occurred and some of the data that we have there. First, this is pillar 1 of our parking plan. Our parking plan was adopted in February of 25, so earlier this year. As many of you remember, there was 3 pillars of our parking plan. The first pillar was adopt new pricing practices to improve utilization of on-street parking supply. So today we'll talk about the first action in pillar 1, which is the implementation of 7-day enforcement. 7-day enforcement began in June, so June 1, south of Evergreen. So, you know, that's what we called phase 1, everything south of Evergreen or 10th Street. So here is a map that many of you have seen. This was our data from 2024. I believe I presented this data in late 24 when I was here at Downtown Stakeholders in the past. So this is our occupancy counts. Occupancy counts were done during peak hours, so from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. This is a map of our weekend occupancy. You could see here the red indicates areas above 85%. The yellow highlights areas that are between 60 and 84%. Green are 0 to 59%. So as you see here, a lot of the red or the high occupancy areas were south of Evergreen. You can also see there are a few black blocks here on the west end of the waterfront. Those areas were under construction. We do have a few here on the east end as well, and then obviously the closure for the farmers market are highlighted here in black as well. But again, this was our baseline. These were occupancy counts that were collected over 16 months, and this is our baseline for 2024. Here's an updated map of our weekend occupancy. So we counted, we continue to count from June to September. This was again during weekend peak hours from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. What you see here is that the occupancy has moved a bit north. So we now have high occupancy up to 12th Street. It also has expanded a little bit east and west. And what I'll do here is I'll toggle between both maps just so you can kind of see the small difference that I'm talking about specifically. So again, here on the west end of downtown, we've seen some occupancy and behavior change where folks are moving a bit north. We also see here at the waterfront the few blocks that were under construction in 2024 have now been opened up and they're available for parking. Many have already moved to high demand, so there's above 85% occupancy there. And then the one construction project that had a block close on the east end has opened up and immediately went to 85%. I do want to highlight and note that 85% is used as a industry standard. 85% essentially means that that's when the perception of not enough parking or that parking is full. Although there are a few available spaces, it usually creates more congestion and traffic as folks are searching for those vehicles, searching for those few spaces. So again, it's an industry standard for us and for folks in best practice in parking to use that number as a way to kind of further evaluate or look into your data further when you reach that mark of 85%. One other small note, there were other developments impacting the parking availability. So for example, the City Hall lot or the lot to the west of City Hall, we lost 130 spaces as a result of the development there. We also know the Main Street Promise had some intermittent street closures. There has also been some additional blocks added, which I highlighted a moment ago on the west end of waterfront as well as the east end of the waterfront. And we also know that the Terminal 1 garage was open, a 1,200 space garage, which was recently opened and available to the public as well. So these are just interesting things that we're taking note of, and we're trying to better understand how it's impacting our overall network.
Because of Main Street Promise project, like work vehicles parked in there, would they be adding to the occupancy rate?
They would not. In theory, no. They have off-site parking at the Library Square is where the contractors are supposed to parking. I'm sure a few of them sneak in and maybe decide to pay for parking. But in theory, they are supposed to be parking elsewhere at a different location, mainly the Library Square.
Out of theory, they would have been tallied.
Correct. They would have been tallied, yeah. So here is
our connection's a little slow. So if you move to another slide, like toggle back there, try it again. Right, one more time. Cross our fingers. There we go. We're figuring it out.
All right. So here is our transaction data. So we're comparing the weekday transaction versus weekend transaction. As you know, we didn't have weekend transaction prior to June, but we did have weekday comparisons to use. So the weekday average for the whole district is 4,100 transactions. Compared to Saturday, our weekday average is 3,386, so slightly under it. But again, I want to note here that when we talk about weekend transactions, we're only talking about south of Evergreen, so roughly half of our district. Our Sunday average was 2,547. So still above half of the transactions for the whole of our district, but this is just a baseline for us to look at and use as a comparison for our weekday and weekend transactions. The table down below highlights roughly 16 weeks of the months of June through September. And you can see here that there are certain weeks that are a lot higher than others. We do believe a lot of times it's driven from events or large farmer market population or folks coming down to visit. But we are tracking it on a weekly basis, and we just wanted to highlight some of the comparisons from weekend to weekday. With that, I will pass it along to Ann to talk a little bit about our Pillar 2.
Pillar 2 is a separate pillar because it deals with a whole different set of issues. Pillar 1 focuses.
We need your microphone.
Oh, yeah. Pillar 2 focuses on an entirely different set of opportunities for parking. What Gabe talked about with Pillar 1 is on-street parking, where there's a meter and where you pull up to the curb. Pillar 2 is an effort to identify parking that's not on street, parking that's not owned by the city. And we know that that parking supply is enormous and that much of it goes unused. So our goal as a city, and this gets to Marcus's question of earlier this hour, is how can we use existing parking? Someone's paid for that, right? That's been a cost to people in our city, to some of our stakeholders. How can we use that to take up parking demand that is occurring now and over the next several years? So that's the way we'll focus on Pillar 2. So the things that are identified here are the primary categories of Pillar 2. What I'm going to focus on today is how we pursue agreements with private property owners for public use of their parking space. And secondly, how we can expand that so that it helps serve the people who come down primarily on the weekends for the events that occur primarily in Esther Short Park, but more and more they will occur on Main Street. Let's go to the next slide. We had an opportunity this summer to test this idea with a pilot project. We chose the Vancouver Arts and Music Festival in combination with a farmer's market that was running simultaneously and adjacent to see, could we make a dent in people's behavior when they were coming down for events in farmer's market? We chose this because our events team and the symphony organization estimated 54,000 people over the multi-day Vancouver Arts and Music Festival. Those are people who are likely to come back downtown, and this is an opportunity to educate them. So we wanted to test our opportunities with that market. We wanted to achieve a couple things. What would happen? How many people could be attracted? And how would we communicate with them? Could we test both dimensions? Communication had two parts. One, would some people take C-Tran? Would they park at a remote location and take C-Tran downtown to those festivals? The answer is yes. We found that out. Number two, would they use public parking that's in private lots? And the answer is yes. We tested that. So for a first run pilot, we got some good information and some encouraging response. One of our concerns was, how do you let someone know where that private parking is? The private world has ways of doing that, and two of the primary competitors in that space are ParkWiz and Spot Hero. Many of you who've gone to Seattle or Washington, D.C. or New York City may have used those platforms. They are typical in larger cities. But Vancouver hadn't seen them before. Portland has, by the way. So we used the festival website to advertise that you could get your parking on ParkWiz and come to Vancouver. We had over 100 people use parking reservations that they secured through ParkWiz. You have to assume that if someone bought a reservation, many, many more people than that actually looked at the website and said, well, I'll do that later, or I'm not going to do it this year. So we certainly got many, many people looking at ParkWiz for this first effort of testing as a pilot. Now I'm going to move away from ParkWiz and Spot Hero and talk about our wonderful partner, the Farmers Market. Farmers Market is also looking for ways that they can make sure their customers are comfortable parking. So they created a contract with the new Terminal 1 parking garage that Gabe mentioned that just opened June 1. That is an additional public parking space for farmers market people. It works the same way the old city Lot 3 works, as we know that parking is going to shrink for the affordable housing. The reaction that the Terminal 1 operator has is encouraging. You know, that's a longer way to walk, right? Somebody has to be willing to do that. But the people who've responded to the Terminal 1 operator who said, this is a beautiful parking structure. I'm glad to know it's here. Farmers Market made that addition, and then in addition, they worked with Chris and Gabe to make arrangements to use one of the city's outlying lots right over near I-5 as a place where their vendors could park. What value is that to us? A vendor usually has a truck, a larger than usual vehicle, and most often a trailer as well. So we wanted to get those bulky vehicles and gear into a lot off street, opening up more spaces on street for public. So let's go now to the next, I talked about data here at the last point on this slide, and I want to talk about some of the results. There are two parts. Is this of interest to private owners who have parking that they could share? And is it of interest to the people who are driving cars? I mentioned before that we had 100 people make reservations. Over half of those made reservations because they saw this announcement on the Vancouver Arts and Music Festival website. That means the festival advertising can help people understand how they can park downtown. That's important to reaching people. The second result in terms of property owners was through the parking operators. I'm talking about people like Ace, Diamond, ProPark, the people who run those parking garages. They understood this because they worked with ParkWiz and Spot Hero in other larger markets. So they said directly, this will help us in our contract with the owners because it brings more customers to our garage. Those three operators brought in 9 owners, 11 parking properties to participate in this pilot effort. So we feel like those results, both from the parking public and from the operators, is a good signal to us that we can move forward with Pillar 2. So as we move forward, we expect to have more data coming as a result of this effort from CTRAN. They have enormous amounts of data, and of course, they're measuring a system and ridership that's much more complex than simply people coming from outlying areas to downtown. So it's not until next month that we're going to begin to look at the first round of data on how we did with remote, or what we call satellite parking, bringing people downtown. But I can tell you anecdotally that after the huge blockbuster concert on Saturday night, I went to Turtle Place, and there were people lined up waiting to get on the next bus that would come. Happy people, they had just heard a beautiful concert. They were happy to be taking the bus rather than trying to get out of town on a car. So that's our good news. What can you look forward to in the future? We're hoping we can use these findings from the pilot project to frame the program for 2026, encourage more private parking lot operators and owners, and do an increased and more advanced job of marketing through not just one event, but through many of the events that occur next summer. Gabe and I are happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'd like to give one plug before that too. Well, we think it'll go actually live on Friday, but if not Friday, early next week we're going to be bringing on a wayfinding consultant. So while we didn't talk specifically about wayfinding in this update, it is a part of the parking plan. And what we learned when we went through that engagement process was one of the barriers is if you're coming downtown, I just don't know where to park. Obviously, parking on the street is a little bit more intuitive. Do I see a spot? Can I park there? where are these garages? Where are these shared parking opportunities? What are some other transportation assets I should be aware of, C-Tran, other things that may come to our downtown in the future? So part of what we're doing is bringing in is how do we think about how we better inform folks coming downtown in their car, and one element of that is how do we make it easier for them to find parking. So I just wanted to flag that. We're gonna, if that will go kind of, we're going to be seeking bids for that work. We think Friday, and that'll be a priority that will be focused on over good chunk of the first half of 2026. So just all right, lots of hands. When we go here first, and then you two in the back. Keep raising your hands. We'll go start here. You don't have to keep them up. Don't keep them up. That'd be tiring.
That's exciting to hear about all the positive ways you're bringing visitors in to locate parking spots. But I live in downtown and there is no place to park. I'm disabled and sometimes I can only find a parking spot 9 or 10 blocks from where I live. So how can we improve that situation?
Can I ask where you live?
Smith Tower.
Smith Tower, yeah, that's smack in the high demand area where we live.
Yes.
You know, with,
Yes. So where do I park?
There are some private garages nearby. The Umpqua Bay Garage offers permits. There's
For
also
disabled people.
they offer all sorts of permits.
They don't have a disabled rate or a senior rate.
Mhm.
I checked with one, it was $176 a month last year.
Are you on the waiting list for the Smith Tower lot?
It's a 5-year waiting list.
Quite, as I said before.
5 to 10, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And there were on-street parking permit signs, and all of those on-street permit signs have now recently, within the last couple of years, couple of weeks, been removed. So I'm not sure where the on-street permits are allowed now.
On Fifth Street, are you saying?
Yes.
Yeah, that was as a result of the Bay Street promise work. Those will go back,
Okay.
in the short term. However, we are exploring things like a low demand, high demand area. That'll be a part of our phase 2 planning. What that is essentially in the high demand areas, the areas that are regularly above 85% or near, those will be considered high demand. And so it's very important to create turnover in those areas. There's a lot of business traffic in your area. As you know, Little Conejo and the businesses right around the corner are very, very busy and do attract a lot of vehicles there. So we expect that will be a part of our high demand area. And so when we make that change, we think that the low demand area will be better suited for long-term parking for folks that are, needing to park
or disabled.
Or disabled, correct. The other thing to note is that you are allowed to park with your ADA placard in the right of way for free for up to 4 hours.
4 hours.
Correct.
And that's just not feasibly possible. I know in Salem, where I lived before, there were special permits you could get if you were a resident in those high demand areas. Is there any hope that Vancouver can allow for residents to have a special permit?
In the high demand areas, not like,
I see. Okay.
It's real too bad.
Yeah.
Thank you. I understand.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I think, hey, ma'am, we'll go with you and then Marcus and then maybe come to you. Okay.
I'm wondering, now that you're doing all of these studies and involving a lot of entities, I want to say who made the decision, but maybe I just want to say, why was the decision made to include Saturday and Sunday while downtown is in shock with the Main Street project? It seems like a really inopportune time to me. That's just common sense to start that kind of a parking challenge when we've got Main Street torn up from one end to the other. So do you think about what's going to happen while we have these kind of temporary challenges?
Absolutely. And frankly, our thinking was that it was, the opportune time to actually begin to manage parking on Saturday and Sunday. A lot of the data shows that there was more than, there's a lot of high demand areas. There's a lot of, parking in illegal areas, prohibited parking in areas on weekends because it was unregulated. With the Main Street promise, the intermittent closure. So again, that was going to reduce the supply of parking in particular areas, which put a larger emphasis on why we needed to be more efficient and actually manage the parking. And furthermore, a lot of our data shows that there is available parking. It's just, a block or two away from Main Street. It's not necessarily on Main Street, which is a busy area, or maybe some of the adjacent blocks. There are some parking spillover, as you call it, but there was available parking, and there's still continue to be available parking just a few blocks over, which again indicates to us that we need to pay attention and to begin to manage the parking in an efficient way, which is ultimately why we made the decision, or why it was suggested to be a part of this parking plan for Saturday and Sunday.
It's hurting the downtown businesses because the people won't work for it. They just don't come.
Yep.
That's just my observation.
One thing I'll definitely acknowledging managing through a big project like Main Street Promise is not easy. So don't want to kind of by any means discount that. One of the things that we are managing before weekend enforcement was we had a fair amount of people parking long-term, could be all weekend, right? And what that does is it doesn't create turnover. So if you're a business and someone just parks for the weekend or long-term there, that space is held permanently for that entire duration. So one of the things we're trying to do is when we have high utilization is make sure that turnover exists so that if you come into downtown, you're not necessarily competing against someone who may be parking there for 12 hours, 24 hours, 48, and maybe perhaps in some cases. So it is a dynamic. It's not easy, but it was in part to incentivize turnover to create more space and opportunities for people visiting businesses. Just kind of one of the many kind of factors we have to kind of think about in managing parking. It's really complex.
Question, and this is on me, and I'm sorry to ask this question, so don't judge me. With Parking Kitty, I used to be able to park and put in 2 hours. And let's say that I went to the business and the business was closed, and so I moved to another spot. And my Parking Kitty was still operational. I could use the rest of my 2 hours there. Is that continuing on? If I park and I buy 2 hours, can I use it for multiple places still?
That change will occur in January. In January, no, you will no longer be able to move to different parts of the district using a payment in a particular zone. There was a recent code change that occurred in, I believe, May of this year, where we ended the transferability. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is that we are trying to create a network of park once. So we were trying to prevent folks or encourage folks to not move their car along the corridor, rather find an area that they can park once and then move along the corridor with other means, whether it be walking or a bike or transit. We want to create, again, a network that is a park once philosophy. The second reason is that, it prevents folks from going to an area that is intended for long-term. So we have areas that are 10-hour or 12-hour where you can park there for longer periods of time because, again, it's a low demand area. And so it prevents folks from maybe going to that area, purchasing parking there, and then moving to a high demand area like on the waterfront or like on Main Street, where it is intended, the 2-hour time limit is intended to create the turnover, exactly to what Chris said, to incentive, to help businesses and to make sure that we're getting the turnover needed for our high business corridor areas.
That enforced now, you said in May,
It is not. No, it will be in January.
in January.
In January, yes.
Marcus, and then we'll go to you up front.
Collectively and overwhelmingly, small business owners and residents express frustration and dissatisfaction with the parking plan. There's a lot of subjective rage at play. What are ways we can better express objective data and get the game plan to these stakeholders so that they see this as a path forward? And are there ways we can better work with the stakeholders to develop a successful path forward? Because for every person here, there's 2,000 or 3,000 armed. And parking is overwhelmingly everyone's big hate topic.
Well, we plan to continue to do engagements like this, right? Continue to give updates to different boards and committees as we move forward in the parking plan, and we continue to implement, the phase 2 or the low demand, high demand. We certainly will continue our community engagement and identify the stakeholders that are important. We know churches and different organizations are going to be very pivotal in kind of the phase 2 process. But, again, we just hope to continue this conversation and continue to inform based off the data and what we're seeing. And we're going to continue on that path.
Here, the parking has been a problem for small business owners, residents. Also, our church downtown on phase 2 could be destroyed. It serves 3 churches. They're all little. We have about 35 people at our church. And if we have to pay for parking, people won't go. They can't afford it. We won't get new members. But I want to tell you what our church does. We provide housing for 30 homeless men. We are the only downtown daycare preschool. We have 3 AA groups that we serve at our church. We have the post office for the houseless. If that's gone, you will all feel it, guys. Everybody will feel it. 30 more people on the street. So the parking is a problem, guys. It really is. You might be listening to all these experts, but please listen to your people. Amen. Your people are telling you what's wrong.
Again, to go off of hers, the decision to do this now, in your guys' own words, of a historically large infrastructure construction project. And, your reasonings of people posting up too long to park, that just doesn't cut it right now. That's not a great reason when we're trying to get people in businesses. And then you're also implementing that you can park and pay, but now, if you go a few more blocks away, you can't. So you should ride your bike instead. Or if you have groceries and you need to carry them and walk around, like none of this makes any sense. And especially right now, like what is the huge reason? What's the point of this money grab in the current state of this construction downtown?
During the week or on the week? Is this a comment about weekend enforcement?
7-day a week.
Yeah, so weekend enforcement.
You
So
have
if,
people on Sunday going to church, that's a pay now that never
Sure.
was really a thing.
sure, well, we haven't,
What's the urgency of?
phase 2.
Urgency of the money grab right now, like why right now?
I don't know if I'd phrase it as it's not a money grab. It is to manage high occupancy, high utilization. And on the weekends, if we weren't managing it that way, parking would be harder to find when you're coming downtown on the weekend because you would have people parking long-term on the street. And so what we're trying to do is there is high demand. And yes, Main Street has caused, as blocks get constructed, obviously parking comes off that block. And so it's reduced. But if you let people.
I understand this is what you guys are going to do, but why during this giant project when we're just trying to get people in businesses?
Because demand for parking is higher when you reduce supply. Main Street Promise has reduced supply on the street. And so if you don't incentivize turnover and people parked a block off Main Street, 2 blocks off Main Street for longer periods of time, which they can on the weekends, it would actually create less opportunity to park. So we have to incentivize the turnover on the weekends as well. Otherwise, it would be more difficult to find parking on the street. Yeah. Right there.
Hi, my name is Lucas. I'm also a small town business owner. I appreciate what you're saying about supply and demand, and I think a healthy, legislation around parking is incredibly important. On the prior, alluding to the prior discussion about underdeveloped parcels and things that are in development for public works and housing, are there any efforts to address the supply issue of parking with developing some of these underdeveloped parcels to stem the transition of this transformative period that is materially impacting a lot of people?
That's probably a question. We don't, the downtown redevelopment study is kind of pointing to, here are areas where development long-term, we're talking 10, 15, 20 years, is likely to occur. We don't have there's not a specific project. A lot of those conversations come up when there's a specific kind of redevelopment project that you're considering. If it's privately owned, the city obviously has a little bit less influence than if it's publicly owned. One of the, most housing, even if minimums go away, most housing projects are going to build parking on those. And where they're not, one of the things we're going to be looking at long-term is how can we create kind of more district shared parking. So maybe you have an affordable housing project being built. By not requiring parking in that particular facility, it makes it easier to build that affordable housing, quite frankly, in this environment, finance it all together. But maybe a block away, through some of our shared parking agreements or future investments, we would have kind of more of those types of options. A little hard to respond to because we're not talking about a specific kind of project like that. The parallel would be actually Waterfront Gateway. You can see next. Am I pointing in the right direction? That way. There's an affordable housing project going up. One of the elements of that bigger development is a parking garage that will be phased into there as well. So as we think about specific, it's a little bit easier to answer that when you have like an actual project that's kind of underway than kind of theoretical. But yeah.
I suppose I'm asking less to see if there's any development in a non-theoretical project to decouple, not necessarily that the housing is not a thing to support. I'm in favor of it, but a parking solution, and even if it is in the 5-year timeline to address these issues people have, that could also be used for these off-site parking locations for events in the downtown city. I think a dedicated commitment to trying to develop some of these parcels into a public work that would benefit not only the community, the churchgoers, the business owners, but also the people who use.
Yeah, we share a goal there. So one of the things Ann's talking about a pilot around shared parking, and it was kind of around an event, right? Something where a lot of people are coming down. What did we learn from that? How do we think about that more permanently and long term? I can't remember the exact number, but I believe downtown there's something like total or just private.
So 10,000.
There's 10,000 private parking spots downtown that aren't really available to the public. Now, are we going to be able to kind of come up with shared agreements for all 10,000? Probably no, but what Ann was able to do in a pilot scenario is open up some of those private parking that typically isn't as accessible. It was built for workers in office buildings or things like that. It's the main focus of Pillar 2 is how do we have existing parking that just can't be utilized, and how do we create a partnership where that can be more accessible to the public? So that Ann's pilot was a first attempt at that to learn, but that's over the next 5+ years. That's probably one of the signature aspects of the parking plan.
Right. And I think that sounds very promising. And what I would like to see moving forward as we get to that next pillar and that next stage of the process is that perhaps some of this infrastructure that gets laid out for events could be used for offletting the additional restrictions for parking in the meantime. So if we have that system set up for events, perhaps those same spaces could be used in the intermediary while this is a pressing issue.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Did you still want to speak?
I just wanted, piggybacking off of that, like other solutions to parking and supply and demand, instead of doing the 7 days a week, maybe like finding those spots and utilizing them on the weekend. So those are paid spots, but the whole street doesn't have to be paid. It has been brought up with us as a small business that people are finding it harder to come down on the weekends, and it definitely comes into their mind whether they're going to come down or not.
Appreciate that.
And just so you all know,
Do you want to?
yeah. I just got back from a conference with all cities throughout Washington, and parking was the number one topic, and the room was overflowing. Every city feels that there's a difficulty with parking. And the thing, as cities grow, what I'm learning being new to parking, because I feel like everything we hear is counterintuitive to what what I would call our normal logic, is just a community member. But the thing with parking, and as our city grows, the more in demand we are, and the more we grow, like Chris was saying, the more important every single space will be. So when you look at a city becoming bigger and growing, every single spot becomes such high importance real estate that all of these little levers we're trying to pull with quicker turnover, it's because as we grow, we have to turn it over faster. So I know all of us who live here, that doesn't seem like it makes any sense, but all the statistics show is that Vancouver is going to grow exponentially. So if this is how many spots we have to pull every lever we can to make sure that people are coming and shopping, and there is turnover. And finding the balance between those of us who live here, those of us who are disabled and live here, those of us who shop here, and those of us who work downtown, it's going to be challenging to make sure everybody's happy and keep the shoppers coming and the space is turning over, so those shoppers and diners are spending money in our Main Street businesses, so we don't end up looking like these larger areas like the waterfront. We want to stay small.
Hey, Mark Wilson, come back.
I want to step away from policies for a second and talk about actual enforcement. I live, work, and play downtown, and I routinely see parking officers engage with the public in professional, friendly, and helpful manners. And I think, they err on the side of education, which is why they almost issued as many warnings as tickets. So while there's a lot of room and passion to discuss the actual policies, I want to take a moment and say I really appreciate that our parking enforcement officers are going out of the way to be working with the public and being positive stewards of the public assets.
Appreciate saying that. We're biased. We think they're pretty wonderful. They obviously write tickets, so some people may not view them as pretty wonderful, but very friendly. They're also trying to be somewhat ambassadors to downtown and help answer questions and whatnot. So it's not an easy job that they have. So we appreciate those comments. Yeah.
This is just kind of a little funny thing. In Montana, years ago, the parking enforcement person would hold the ticket up in the air, and if you could get it out of their hand, you didn't have to pay the ticket.
We'll look into it. I don't know.
You hire short enforcement.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say that in many cases, our developers are given tax incentives. And so, and what those tax incentives are for the developer. I really wish that they had to put some type of parking in, even if it was just for a portion. That's my comment. My other question is, and I think this is a long question, so when you borrow or rent or use a private parking lot, let's say all it has is 20 cars. Is there a signed agreement between the owner of that property and the city for liability, for cleaning, for use of the parking lot? How is it just a friendly handshake? How is that happening now?
We think that's going to be a sequence and an evolutionary sequence. For instance, right now, it's not happening with the signed agreement. It was the operators who understood the value of using ParkWiz and Spot Hero to communicate parking availability that launched this. So we did it simply through the private sector platforms, right? People came in, that owner, the person you're speaking of, that parking owner had more revenue because of the business practice that the operator brought. So it was a simple thing to do for a pilot. In the long run, if we're talking about a segment of parking being dedicated to a housing development so that housing development doesn't have to build as much parking, That would be contractual. It would be put in place before the housing was developed, right? So everyone knows liability, maintenance, rights of entry, all of that kind of thing. So expect a spectrum as we figure out how this is going on, how it can happen and best serve Vancouver.
People are just very litigious, and if there would be an accident or something, or if somebody was injured, that makes me crazy.
Understood.
Not the cutoff. Maybe if we have one quick one, we do need to be out of here by 3 and rearrange the room. But you haven't spoken yet, so maybe last question here.
Yeah, I was just wondering, the money that you know, it's incentivizing people not to stay there and you're trying to control how many people can park. What do you guys, unless I don't, you guys have talked about this, what are you guys using for that money for?
Can't get into specifics, but the money we would use it for, it pays our officers and the enforcement team, so it's paying salaries and benefits and all those types of things. It pays for when we get to the point of negotiating shared parking agreements with private lots, perhaps the city would be needing to bring in technology, parking kitty, or a gate for parking to kind of manage those types of things. It would cover costs of infrastructure like that. It covers cost of all our existing infrastructure. So we own a garage that we're sinking quite a bit of money into right now to update the access control because it keeps breaking down, all the pay stations, contracts for things like parking kitty. It funds our wayfinding study that we referenced. One of the concepts we're working on with partners is kind of more what we call a circulator downtown. Is maybe you come down, you park in a garage, and you're at the waterfront, but you want to go out to eat on Main Street or uptown. How can you get around downtown without having to get in your car, find new parking? Those types of investments take money, so it covers newer investments like wayfinding, shared parking agreements, circulator concepts, but ultimately it allows us to maintain our existing assets, pay stations, garages that the city owns, and enforcement officers.
So the second part of the question is, can't some of that money, because it's taken away customers, can't some of that money go towards the businesses, maybe to pay, for legitimate customers to be able to go to that business?
Parking revenue, it's either RCW at state level or ordinance, can only be used for parking assets. We can't use it for other purposes. We do have to go. I'm not trying to cut off. The good news is we bring parking back somewhat frequently here. It's a hot topic. So there will be other opportunities. We've referenced phase 2. Expect for north of Evergreen, there's going to be a whole many months kind of engagement process, talking to stakeholders as part of that is an opportunity. We'll bring parking back to downtown stakeholders conversation. So I don't want it to feel like by any means the end of conversation around this topic. We know it's something that will come up every year, multiple times a year for a long time. So thank you for coming today with these 3 topics, and sorry to be a little abrupt and kind of move people out, but I just want to make sure we rearrange the room for the new meeting. So thank you.
Oh, I big that.